Greetings everyone! With the new most wanted list, hopefully everyone's rejuvenated, revitalized and ready for some Netrunner. Now, with rumor mill on the most wanted list at tier 3, Caprice is out to play and it's only natural that we begin our most wanted list testing with FOODCOATS, which now can run Caprice and attempt to score out. I'm not practicing FOODCOATS to bring to a big tournament however, because runners are more than well equipped to deal with FOODCOATS. It's not an unwinnable matchup at all. In fact, I played a game against James Gray, who was running smoked, and he absolutely smoked me. No kidding. What I'm gonna feature now is our second game of FOODCOATS versus Smoke, and I'm playing this FOODCOATS deck to see what weaknesses it has against a deck like Smoke. Through this video, I hope that you will learn about the weaknesses of FOODCOATS and what a runner can do to exploit said weaknesses. Let's jump into the game. Alright, as I mentioned, this game was a lot more closer. I actually have a good opening because as you see, I open with Eve and Breakaway Grid. So I can do such an opening as you see here, Breakaway Grid and Eve in the remote. I don't even need to protect it because if my opponent goes to trash it, they're gonna be the ones losing out. My opponent will be paying 7 credits to trash this entire server, and I can recur it for a simple 2 credits with Friends. This is how sick Friends is. In fact, I'm so confident about this, I'm willing to dedicate my second piece of ice to HQ instead of the remote. Also partially because there's a Temujin directed right at HQ, that's like a gun being pointed at my head. I wouldn't like my opponent to be running furthermore. Now eventually my opponent does get through, clicking through the fetch out 3, thankfully not sniping the ABT from my hand, and this is where I can start building up my scoring remotes. But Architect is actually not the most ideal ice for the remote, to be honest. So I rather have the Architect on R&D because that's where I can gear check for my opponent's dagger. That's something I'm looking to do. But in the meantime, another important thing to do is to maximize your resources, and this means constructing a second remote to get my second Eve going. Every time there's an Eve campaign or a Adonis campaign sitting in your hand, that is money that is not ticking down for you. Those are resources you have to milk as FOODCOATS if you want to get the most out of your game. It's like holding a hedge fund in your hand but not using it. Sometimes there's a reason to do so, but most of the time you actually want them to be ticking down. So this is why I try to get the second Eve campaign on the board as soon as possible. It will be doing a lot of work for me throughout the game. It also means that once my first Eve campaign ticks down, I will now have a free server to score in while I'm still getting money from the second Eve campaign. I start getting agenda flooded here, which is perfectly normal because, well, there are agendas in my deck. I will draw into them sooner or later. Thankfully, my opponent doesn't really assault HQ here, so I actually get a couple of turns of respite to build up my scoring remote. And thankfully, my opponent actually directs Temujin on archives here. If they directed it on HQ, I could be in a lot of trouble because a lot of agendas will be going my opponent's way. With this, I can start jamming agendas into server 1 once the Eve campaign runs out. I could override the Eve campaign earlier because I'm not really losing out too much. The problem with that is that it strongly telegraphs that I have an agenda in the remote if I'm overwriting the Eve campaign. So I would like to avoid doing that, especially given that my opponent has now completely set up their breaker suite. That is very quick, isn't it? That was just a couple of turns of setting up, and guess what? My opponent now has all 3 breakers out. And the economy is starting to roll with 2 daily casts ticking down and a Temujin on archives. I do get to fire the net damage subroutine on Assassin because my opponent ran out of credits, but that's a rather relatively small hit. An indexing goes in the bin, but my opponent has more coming up. So at this point, I'm looking at my opponent. They're pretty poor. I think I can actually afford to do exactly what I said earlier, to jam an agenda in the remote. I don't think my opponent can contest it here, and I'm even going to boldly advance it in their face. Why am I doing this? Because I want to trigger the ABT. The plan is to double advance the ABT, score it, trigger it. If there are agendas that get milled, I can use Friends in high places to recur the agenda back into my scoring remote. And I have an Ash to defend the scoring remote, so I should be good here. Unexpectedly, my opponent actually chooses to contest the remote, so I need to start thinking about how I'm going to deal with this. I don't actually have as much money as I thought I did. As such, I can't actually afford to rest all the ice on the remote. Even though it looks threatening, my opponent rightfully runs it instead of spending a turn to set up, which is huge. This is going to set me back quite a bit. Not only am I forced to rest 2 pieces of ice here, I'll also have to invest a bit of money into the Ash trays to keep my opponent out. Here comes the Ash. My opponent has 5 credits, but against Smoke, you have to be very careful. You have to pump the trace by the number of credits they have, plus the Smoke net Merker credit. So they have a total of 5 plus 1 on net Merker, the total of 6. I need to boost the trace up to 7. They do trash the Ash and then go in with a cold read. Goodness me. Okay, that's quite bad. Well, the cold read allows them to get through the remote. It's kind of like a mini stim hack, and it was very effective in this case. I did not see this coming. I did not expect them to get through the remote twice. This is a disaster. I'm going to lose the ABT right here. Of course, my opponent's going to take a huge tempo hit themselves, but I'm the one that's losing out because I still have 3 agendas in my hand, but I don't really have the capability to score it. This is where having a Caprice instead of Ash would really, really help. Caprice would just outright deny my opponent entry 2/3 of the time. Something that Ash wouldn't do. In fact, I think my opponent would be rather disincentivized to run the remote if they saw an Ash at the base of it. If they saw a Caprice at the base of it, as opposed to an Ash where they can trash the Ash and then confidently assess the situation and know that they can re-enter server 1. So yeah, this is why FOODCOATS runs to Caprice, and this is why Caprice is needed. It is very strong, rightfully so, and is what you need against runners nowadays. Smoke is so powerful. She is able to contest a Fairchild 3 Eli server twice and trash an Ash in the same turn, starting on only 8 credits. That's insane. Now I'm agenda flooded, completely agenda flooded, so I basically only have 1 line of play here. Install an agenda, take a credit, maybe take 2 credits. I don't know. This looks really bad. At this point, I should just pretend that there isn't an agenda in there. But here's the mistake. I used a single Friends in High Places to recur just a single Ash. This was quite a big mistake because it basically telegraphs that there's an agenda in the server, which I shouldn't do. Instead, I should just drop that card in there and pretend that it's an Ash or a Caprice. So that was a mistake right there. 4 agendas in my hand. I'm so gonna lose this game. Anyway, fire ABT. Yep. No regrets. Well, unfortunately, that was how it was meant to be. And yeah, my opponent's gonna get a global food. Turns out that even though I have 4 agendas in my hand and there are 2 agendas in the score area, there's still a couple of agendas left on top of my deck, and they're going to mad dash for the agenda, of course. Great. Yeah, so this is basically the huge game-changing play. So the ABT fire basically cost me 3 agenda points. My opponent was able to very confidently mad dash into archives without much repercussion and fetch the global food, which is worth 3 points essentially with the mad dash, putting them on match point, which means they only need to find that 1 more agenda to win the game. The only solace that I have is that there are only 2 agendas left in the 24 deep R&D because the rest are in my HQ. Goodness me. So I continue jamming here. There's no other way for me to win right now. I just need to jam and jam hard. Hopefully I find a Caprice very soon because I'll need Caprice's help to score the last agenda, the global food, which I'll have to manually advance. So yeah. At this point, Smoke is just slicing through my servers like Swiss cheese. It is a bit ridiculous how efficient Smoke is able to make their runs. Not only are the ice very trivial to break, but more importantly, with a Temujin director at whichever server she wants, Smoke will always come out ahead. Because most ice are 4 credits or less to break, and Smoke gets discounts from Cloak and the Smoke ID ability with the recurring credits and Netmerker, which acts like a Desperado. So it's basically impossible to tax out Smoke even on on any Temujin run. My opponent whiffs on the indexing on R&D, obviously, because there are only 2 agendas there. My opponent figures their agendas in hand and runs HQ to fetch the winning ABT. So why did I lose despite having a superior economy start? My opponent, despite being able to get an early Temujin off, was never able to contest my EVE campaigns. And even with 2 whole EVE campaigns worth of money, I still wasn't able to rest sufficient amounts of ice between R&D and my secure scoring remote to keep my opponent from sieging my remote and indexing through R&D. There must be a problem somewhere. And if we look at the strengths of food coats versus smoke, we can easily see why. Food coats relies on strength 4 and strength 5 code gates and sentries, the likes of Ichi 1.0, Fairchild 3.0, to keep the runner out, or at least to tax them heavily. Most runners cannot deal with such ice efficiently. If you're breaking Fairchild 3 with Gordian Blade, or if you're breaking Ichi 1.0 with Mongoose, you are losing the game. However, with a breaker suite as efficient as Refractor and Dagger, as my opponent is sporting in this game, they are able to deal with all such ice for 4 or fewer credits, and this is a big deal because the smoke economy setup of their ID plus the recurring credits from Netmerker plus the cloak means that they essentially get 3 free credits per turn. And this is what made Stealth Andromeda such a powerhouse back in its heyday, because they are able to trigger run-based economy without paying the tax of ice. Normally, Temujin and security testing are less good once you get pop-up windows or, some ice to tax the runner out, making it such that they get less money from those run-based engines. However, you cannot possibly tax out smoke. If they have 3 recurring credits a turn to break ice, which they essentially do once they have their stealth econ suite set up, you need double ice on every single server, including your economy server, whichever server you're chucking your EVE campaigns, your Adonis campaigns into. That is just outright unfeasible with an ice suite as expensive as that from FOODCOATS until at least the mid game, by which point Smoke has completely set up and can run over you completely. So yeah, this is just a horrendous matchup for FOODCOATS in general, and the only real thing you can do as FOODCOATS is to slightly modify your ice suite by attacking Smoke's weak point, which is barriers. Cider adaptive barrier comes into the equation here. This is a piece of ice that I have somewhat underrated when it first came out, but now that Cipher is no longer a thing and ice is now relevant, Cider adaptive barrier is actually pretty decent in a deck that wants to stack lots of ice. In fact, at the Aldershot BABW, this was where I was exposed to this tech. The eventual winner of the tournament, Triss, actually showed how effective Cider could be, consistently getting it to 6 or more strength in most games, and this really taxes out most barrier breakers. In fact, even the most efficient of them all, which is Paperclip, which most people are running on are on nowadays, costs 5 to get through this 4 to res barrier. That's the kind of tax you're looking for if you're trying to deal with a runner such as Smoke. Unfortunately, I did not draw it this game, even though I ran 2 copies of it in FOODCOATS, but this is definitely an ice to look at when you are building your deck and trying to build it against this meta. Now, I did mention the Aldershot BBW tournament, and I was in attendance, but I did pretty badly, something like 18th place out of 28th. But no matter, even though I placed very poorly and I was languishing, I did earn myself the second best prize in gaming. Look at that! Isn't it awesome? Man, I've always wanted to be the very best like no one ever was, and now I get to pursue those dreams. Thanks to Swifty, such an awesome TO, the best one yet. Thanks so much for this. You have no idea how much this means to me. Yeah, of course, the best prize in gaming is none other than $10,000. But that aside, since I have this shiny new, whatever this is, cards, I guess? Let's do an unboxing of it, shall we? For those of you who are only interested in Netrunner stuff, you can close off the video here. There's nothing much else to see. For everyone else, however, I'll be unboxing my very first set of Pokemon cards. I've never used to own any of these as a child. I've seen my friends play with it, but I've never owned any personally. These will be the first I ever had, and from Gen 7 as well. This should be pretty cool. Let's see what we get from here. I have no idea about the rarities of these cards, so... okay. I'm pretty bad at opening these things. Okay, here we go. Okay, let's open from the back. Will we get any shinies? Let's see. Okay, let's bring that out. Alright, first up we have... Oh! Rotom Dex? What is this? Can you see it? I have no idea what this is. Okay, doesn't look very interesting. Passimian. One of the new ones. Looks like a very cheeky tropical monkey of sorts. Okay. How? What? Draw 3 cards. Diesel. I already have a diesel. I don't need this. What else? Energy card. What's this? Ooh, lantern. Oh, I've always liked lantern. Lantern's very cute. Alright. That's not too bad. Oh, this one's a pretty shiny Makuhita. Ooh. I wonder if this is rare. Probably not, but this is pretty nice. Huh. Quite a lot of Gen 3 Pokemon here. What's this? Fomantis. I have no idea what that is. One of those random grass Pokemon. Molo? What name is that? Is that even a Pokemon? I've never heard of it before. Sandigas? Oh, the infamous Sandcastle Pokemon. Okay. What's this? Oh, Dratini. Oh, I love this one. But no Dragonites or Dragonairs. Oh well. And a Diglett. It's not Alolan. Oh, it is an Alolan Diglett. Okay. Alright. Nothing too impressive from this pack, but hey, I have cards. Alright. Yeah. Anyone interested in them? Well, but anyway, hope you enjoyed the unboxing and hope you enjoyed the video on food coats and smoke. I'll be making more most wanted legal videos as we move on throughout the week. In the meantime, thanks for watching. As always, happy Pokemoning. Goodbye.